The next option we're going to talk about the constraint, overview of the constraint, null, unique, primary key, foreign key, and check key constraint. What is the constraint? Constraint, it means the limiting the insertion, the DML on a table. It means, for example, keep a primary key. It means that the key cannot be duplicated. Constraint means not null. A field cannot be null. A field should be unique. A field can be be a field which is accessible to other table or connect to other table, which is we call it the foreign key constraint. A key could be a field could be checked. A check means that field there are some rule and regulation apply on that field. And for example, if we have salary field, we're going to check that the salary never go the salary higher than 5,000, and the teller mistakenly instead of the 5,000 putting 50,000. So that's also another constraint. So limitation on the table, that's what we call it, constraint. Here's the constraint guideline, which is I let you to read from your book. Only we do an example about it. Well, let's start for simplest constraint, which is the check constraint, probably primary key or check constraint. I'll go and show you the check constraint and show you the effect of it. Let's consider the table that we created test. Now I recreate the table test and write here element number, but I'm going to say check element is less than 100. And when we use element less than 100 and executing this one, you're going to create our table, and I'm going to display that one. So let's go recopy this one, bring it right here and paste it. Well, the table create with the check constraint. Now let's look at the limitation. If I attempting to insert a value greater than even the 100, it should not accept that value. Insert into test values 100, and you're going to see that the check constraint pop up and tell me you have a constraint, and just going to generate for me a constraint name. Well, this check constraint, because I did not use this model right here, a constraint name, test con constraint, or any other name. This is optional name. So system automatically generate a constraint. Let's go ahead and recreate the table and resolve this issue, and having a check constraint that I know what is the I like to name it, and when the arrow raise, it's going to just display my constraint, not the system defined name constraint name. I drop the table and I'm going to and table created, this time by check constraint. Now I'm going to attempting to do the same insertion that I did before, and you're going to see if I attempting to do the same insertion, this time it's going to use my check constraint name, this one that I have it right here, as you're going to see right here. Let me have both the screen. See, you're going to see the difference. You use my check constraint that I ask, and if I bring my number less than 100, then it's going to accept my number. So here's the format environment, that the format that you're going to create a constraint. You're going to say create table, table, whatever the table name is, this one, your column, your data type, default expression or value, sysdate, number by multiply 1 divided by 7, or any other format of expression. Then you put a constraint name, as we did it right here, as we did this constraint name right here. Let me bring it up so you can see much more better. I use right here create column. My column is element, the data type is number. I didn't use any default value, that's optional. Then I put the word constraint. I put my constraint column constraint, which is right here, the type of the constraint that I have, and this is my type of constraint, and I repeat that one as many column as I want. Here is more example. Let's go look at a live example. And here is the live example. As you see, we create an employee table, employee ID 6. The data type, we're going to say it is constraint. Constraint name is, this is constraint name. The type of the constraint is the primary key. Then we put a comma, separate that one, and we go follow up with the other column. Then we put a comma and we go for the next column. If I don't have any more column, so I'll go and take this one out, all this dot out, close the parentheses, for this open parentheses, semicolon, and it going to create a table with the primary key constraint. Here is another type of constraint that we have it right here, which is not null constraint. We have it right here. Also we have another constraint employee ID PK, which is employee ID primary key. So if you notice in right here, we can adding the constraint at the end of last column, and this is known by the table constraint, table level constraint, and this one known by column level constraint. Two different type of constraint, but it behave the same way. As we mentioned before, not null constraint that we had in this slide right here, it means this field job ID cannot be null. You have to have a value for job ID always. And see job ID, if we leave it null when you try to insert a row, it's going to cause difficulty. But commission, we did not specify anything, and commission could be null. We didn't specify any restriction on the commission field. As you going to see, this example ran based on the employee table. Let's look at the employee. If you look in this employee table, you're going to see that we don't have any constraint on the commission PCT, and commission PCT could be null, could be how you could put a number, but not null is definitely this field job ID, not null. It's hiring date, not null is email, and not null is last name. Well, not null right here, you're going to say it cannot be null. It could be the reason of that one primary key, or it may be not null constraint that we had him right here, not null constraint that we have right here. The next option, which is unique, not null and primary key is they are pretty close to each other. Unique mean you cannot duplicate a key twice, but null also is a unique option. However, primary key cannot be null. So let's have a table. So the unique mean not duplicate, not null mean cannot be null. So if I have a combination of both of this, it should be primary key. So not null field, when I put it, it means you must put a value, and when you must put a value and that value cannot be duplicated, it's equal to the primary key. So this data type is too strong. The unique and not null, they are less constrained, less strong. Let's put it this way. Here is an example how we can use the constraint for unique key. As you're going to see in this slide, the department ID is unique, so we cannot have any duplicated key. Well, what is the foreign key? Foreign key relation, it means that the connection between two tables, which is in one table the field is primary key. In department table, you're going to see that we have department ID is primary key, and never this primary key, which is department ID, repeated twice, is primary key. But this is a connector to the table of employee, but this employee, they can have as many duplicate of this primary key of the department table. So if we do this one, what is the purpose of it? First, let's talk about this one. This one we call it parent table, that containing the primary key. This one we call it the child table, which is employee table. So when we try to insert the employee into the employee table, that employee should be member of a department. Otherwise, if he is not member of if the department that we try to insert him does not exist, we cannot add that employee to the employee table. So when we create a employee, let's consider like King. King must belong to the department. His department is 90. If department 90 doesn't exist in the department table, we cannot insert the King into the employee table. So so again, the employee table is the child table and the parent table is department. Why parent table is department? Because we have a connection key which is department ID, which is in the primary key in this table, but it is not primary key in the employee table. And when we comparing these two tables with each other, if you remember on the DML that we in the select statement that we did, we extracting row from department table and employee table. Here is the format of creating a foreign key constraint. When first we have to create the employee table, first we have to create the department table, and inserting the desired row that we want, we can insert it into department table first, then we can insert the row in the employee table. So imagine right here I have creating the employee table up to this point, but when I receiving to the department ID of the table employee, I'm going to say create a constraint on employee between the employee and department, which is foreign key. This is name format, and you may use in your own style, but Oracle recommends you use this format because it's going to help you when you display the arrow constraint arrow. Employee table, department table, a foreign key exists between them, and then we use the reserve key foreign key on department ID, reference to department table on department ID. So this department ID refer to this department ID right here, and this department ID reference to department table. So we must have a table such as department, which is department ID is a primary key in that table. And here is another constraint that I put in your example in this book right here. Here is the rule and regulation that you have to apply on the constraint, foreign key constraint, because when you try to drop a table, drop a user, we cannot have orphan child. And if you're removing an employee, first you have to remove all the employee from a department, from employee table, then you can move the department from department table. Also we have on delete cascade option. Here is a rule and regulation. Here is the example for check key constraint that already we ran an example on that one. This is another example that your book using. Here is the original structure of employee table when we created. As you can see that we have primary key, not null, unique key, not null, check key, and reference to the department table employee, reference to employee, the same table. This is a constraint. The reference foreign key constraint refer to the same table, employee table on employee ID, employee ID right here. So an employee, before he become a manager, he has to be an employee by itself. So this is another type of constraint that we have in a table to itself, and there is no way that the employee can be exist and he be a manager. So all employee, they have to be employee before they have a manager key right here. And this is another reference foreign key constraint to the department table that we ran an example of. Here show you another example that when you violating the constraint rule and attempting to set department ID to 55 where the department ID is 110, and department 55 does not exist on the department table. This is employee table, because when you try to insert this 55 in the employee table, it has to go to the department table and verify the primary key 55 exists on the department table. When it doesn't exist, you violating the constraint, and it stop the transaction or insertion of the. Here's another example, creating a table using a sub. Here's an example of it. Create a table dpt-ad as this is the subquery. Select this column and this column, create a dummy column like this one, hiring date from employee table for where department ID is equal to AD. So this is another type of creating table. Well, this is the form that you're going to describe the table. And finally, if a table exists, can we alter a table, add a constraint, or enable a constraint? Yes. We can add a new column by using the alter command, or modify a column, define a column, a default value for a column, drop a column, rename a column, change a table to read only status. We can do all those changes by using alter. As you know, the alter is a DDL. Whatever we did so far in this chapter, they are data definition language portion of the, or just name it SQL. We can alter a table and change it to the read only, so you cannot provide any write to a table. Or we may say alter table employee read write. We give both options. This is another command. Finally, we go to the drop statement that we used the drop statement before, and here's the way that you're going to say drop table department, recommending you, if you do not want a table to put him in the recycle bin, always drop a table with the word purge after that one. If you don't using the purge, you keep a copy of the data on the recycle bin, and which is accessible, and you can reclaim your resources back.